For the next section, we're going to talk about verbs that are stem changers in different ways. Okay? So only for preterite tense. So the whole chart that you got over stem changing present tense verbs, some of those apply to preterite, but not all. Okay? So, but you do have a chart that has O to UE and E to I changes in the present tense, but those two changes do not happen in the preterite. Okay? Remember that the only verbs from that chart that apply to preterite tense are verbs that end in what? IR. So verbs that end in IR will always be basement verbs, which we'll get to here in a second. Okay. So you have your boot verbs chart, which is for your reference. On the bottom right-hand side, you have some more verbs that are in the preterite, which again, remember, they're boot in the present tense, but they're basement. They only change in the bottom two forms for the preterite or past tense. What are the two kinds of changes we have in the basement for the preterite? O to U and E to I. Okay. Is there such change as E to IE in the preterite?
Nope.
Is there such a change as O to UE in the preterite? Nope. So just O to U and E to I in the basement in the bottom two. So verbs like preferir, divertirse, normally are E to IE verbs in the present tense, and they make a boot change. But when you see them in the preterite or past tense, they're E to I verbs in the basement only in the bottom two forms. Is this all coming back to us? Refreshing. So again, only refer to verbs that end in IR, so only basement verbs from that chart. Only the IR ones are basements. Okay. And then we talked about this, we just didn't go into too much depth, that some verbs, ER and IR verbs that have a stem, the stem of the verb ends in a vowel. Now what's the difference between a stem and the whole infinitive verb?
The stem is just without the ending.
Correct. So the stem is everything up until AR, ER, IR that you're going to drop to make the conjugation. So when you have that last vowel, or the last letter of the stem being a vowel, you're going to end up with basement verbs. And we didn't really call them basement when we went over them the first time. But what will happen is you'll end up with the three vowels in a row. Remember when we talked about that? Okay. Do you remember which verb we talked about it with? Le. Good. You're going to end up with the three vowels in a row. And then you change I to Y and the bottom two, so you can also call it a basement if you want to. Now, we only did leer. I want you to jot down the rest of these as examples of other verbs that will also make that change. Okay. Caer or caerse, to fall or collapse. That one's in your reflexive chart. We just didn't use it too much. Construir is to build. Creer is to believe. It's a regular verb in the present tense, but in the preterite it makes an I to Y basement change. Distribuir, cognate to distribute. Incluir, cognate to include. Leer, we've already known that it changes, but to read. And oír is one I believe we saw in our midterm review, was an I to Y change as well, to hear.
Is that an accent?
It's an accent on the original I, yes. And then poseer, to possess or own. Now, if you remember, when we talked about the three vowel in a row rule, remember that it's a made up rule. I made it up. It doesn't exist. It's not in any grammar book. But that's just to help you remember of what happens with some of these verbs. That if you end up with three vowels in a row, you're going to change I to Y. It will not happen with every single verb. So I'm going to show you an example of how it won't happen with every single verb. Okay. What I just talked about up here with QU and GU being combo letters, you only hear, you don't hear that U. You only hear that first sound. That's where it won't technically apply to those. Because the U won't count as a separate vowel when it's used with Q and G, because it's a combo letter. So, for example, for your new I to Y verbs, leer we've already known changes I to Y in the bottom two forms. Okay. Also, reminder, good place to say it here, that these verbs, any of your I to Ys will get extra accents on the to form and then nosotros form. Those I's will get accents. The yo form normally has it, the ellos usted form normally has it, and then the ellos, ellas, ustedes form, because Romy doesn't get one. Okay. But I to Y's do not apply to QU or GU, the ones that make a combo, make one sound. Like the verb esquiar. Okay, we talked about that, and technically should only really apply to ER and IR verbs, but this one happens to be an AR verb, which is your first clue, won't work. But the stem ends in a what? An I. Okay, and then you have a U, and then you're most likely going to have a vowel for the ending. So that's where this would happen. Okay. It's QU again, it wouldn't apply to them, but if you have U, I, and E, that's 3 vowels in a row, right? So you would think I to Y doesn't apply. Okay. So your first clue that it doesn't apply is it's an AR verb. It only applies to ER and IR. And that it's usually just in the basement. So you don't normally have 3 vowels in a row at the top. Okay. So there is no I to Y change. Also, for some reason, this a lot of people get this one confused with your LAO state ending for ER and IR verbs is IO with an accent. But for AR verbs, just O. This one just happens to end. The stem happens to end in an I. Okay, so it looks like IO, but it's just O. So QU and GU, you don't hear that U combination letter. The I to Y will not apply to these. Okay. But for the test that we're going to work on next week, you will need to know the regular verbs. So we just went over your regular endings. Your categorized verbs, watch out for those, only change in what form?
Yo.
Yo form, good. With accents, of course. Basements, you technically have 3 kinds, E to I, O to U, and I to Y. Okay, only change in the bottom 2. Remember with your I to Y ones, you have extra accents on the to form, and then the surplus form. And then the new preterite info, which we're going to go over with this chapter. Today I just want to spend the time reviewing just what we've learned so far. We're going to do new stuff tomorrow. The first part of new stuff. I'm going to split it up into 2 parts, then we're going to put it all together next week. We're going to continue working with anything to do with preterite for this chapter. So far, so good? I want you to, you can do it on your sponge notebook or you can do it on a separate sheet of paper, just to practice. Jot down, let's do 8 different boxes and conjugate the following verbs for you to make sure you've got your conjugations okay with a mixture of different things that happen in the preterite. So nadar, leer, navegar, dormir, abrir, explicar, organizar, and divertirse. Go ahead and conjugate those in the preterite tense and make sure you fill in your meanings next to each box.